Sparklings. So today I wanted to talk about Italian horror films and the Giallo genre. I have done a director spotlight for Dario Argento already. He's one of my favorite directors. I've seen almost all of his films. I think there's like 2 left, but I've seen everything else. So he's only going to be sort of covered in this since he's already been covered. So for those who do not know what Giallo films are, it's a type of really campy, stylish thriller that was prevalent in Italy and neighboring countries from the early 60s and then kind of died out in the 80s, and it was still around in the 90s, and it still continues today, but it's a little different stylistically. So there are a few prevalent directors for this, and I will do a proper spotlight on Mario Bava at another point in time because I haven't seen all of his films yet. But Bava was one of the kind of starters of this movement, and I own 5 of his films. I've seen more than that, but I own 5. And the first one in here is I Vampiri, which is actually, he's not credited as the director in the original release. There is also Black Sunday, Blood and Black Lace, Black Sabbath, and Barren Blood. I've also seen a few others, including Lisa and the Devil and Bay of Blood, and I think there's some others that my brain is not able to remind me of right now. So he is one of the first people to really utilize this genre and make it popular in Italy. He was one of the most successful Italian directors of his time. And the other mainstream success would be Dario Argento. Like I said, I really like his movies, so that's why I have more than half of them right here. And as I also said, I've already done a director spotlight, so we're not going to go into this, but I figured I'd bring them over. So from his Animal trilogy to his Three Mothers trilogy to his other classic Giallo films, Argento does the mystery thriller aspect quite well. One of the things that is most prevalent in these films are bright color palettes, intense electronic styled music, lots of sex, and very like graphic, almost comical death sequences. It seems like each one of these directors has like a signature favorite death move. With Bava, it seems to be slitting throats. With Argento, it seems to be throwing someone through a window. And with this next one, Lucio Fulci, it seems to be eye gouging. I have 3 of his films. I've seen 5 of his films, and I will do a spotlight on him some other time as well. But this is the, I don't know what this, I can't remember what this trilogy is called, but I've also seen Zombie and Don't Torture a Duckling. But this is City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and House by the Cemetery, which is kind of like the supernatural thriller, and all of them involve reanimated dead people and maggots and violence without plot, because that's what Fulci does best. And The Beyond is probably his crowning achievement when it comes to his favorite trope of eye gouging. So all these films have these very bright, lurid color palettes, and you usually have this really weird thing where like they're speaking English, but the lip sync doesn't match up very well. With House by the Cemetery, it's very notable that the young boy Bob is very clearly dubbed by an adult woman. And these things kind of happen where the likelihood that there's an Italian soundtrack to this is not that high, mostly because they would record sound separately from when they recorded video, and then they'd overdub, and they'd usually do it in English in order to have a wider distribution. And so some of these films did in fact reach the US pretty easily, although several of them were violent enough to be considered video nasties in the 1980s. Another prevalent director who I believe was a cinematographer and unit director for Dario Argento and Mario Bava both is Michael Savi. And the 3 films of his that I have would be Stage Fright, The Church, and The Cemetery Man. He's done a lot of second unit stuff. He hasn't done a lot of actual directing, but I love all these films, especially Cemetery Man. And then, including Bava, this is Lamberto Bava's work, which is Mario Bava's son. I haven't seen the sequel, but this is a pretty lurid, crazy mess. So that's kind of the basic rundown on what to expect from Giallo films and from Italian horror films. pretty much all of these films are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There's a handful that go into the 90s and into the 2000s and 2010s. But the 2000s and 2010s kind of has this like Giallo revival or like dedication, like stylistically. It's like it's not true Giallo because it's too self-aware of itself. I can't use real words sometimes. But pretty much these are films that's the style that they went with because that was the style of the time and that's the style that the director knew. And then there are newer films that are playing homage to these older films. And the three that I pulled off of my shelf to pick, the only one of these is like a true like neo-Giallo film, and that would be The Editor, which I finally got around to watching after reading a great article about it in Rue Morgue a couple of years ago. And this is supposed to be set in the 70s. You have the off lip syncs, you have the bright colors, you even have the score done by Claudio Simonetti of Goblin, who did the majority of Dario Argento's films. And it even features Udo Kier, a popular actor in Mario Bava and Dario Argento films. He's a big cult actor. But this was a violent, gory mess with a lot of sex, a lot of bright colors, and exactly what I was hoping it would be. There's usually like a mystery element to all these films. And the reason why they are called Giallo, and it took me a while to kind of figure out why they're called this, but they're mostly based off of like pulp novels, like pulp thrillers and mysteries that are available in Italy that were noticed by their yellow covers because Giallo means yellow. These other two films are not necessarily Giallo at all, but I figured I would note their existence because of their use of color and violence. The Neon Demon I was not terribly impressed with. It's very pretty, but it's entirely too slow, and the plot is not driving enough to carry it through its like hour and 50-minute runtime. But it does have the kind of color palette and flash and lack of substance that I expect from Giallo. And The Love Witch is a kind of strange one because it's not very popular for some people. A lot of people are pretty divided on it because on the one hand, it's campy, it's ridiculous, but it's an homage to 60s horror and melodrama films. So all the acting is highly melodramatic and too much, and it's very intentional. I appreciate it shot in 35mm and that the director, writer, producer also did all of the costumes, which are amazing. The other two neo-Giallo films that I would recommend that are a little less approachable would be Amer and The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears, which are from the same directorial duo from France, whose names I'm forgetting because I'm terrible at French. And those are recent watches that take a lot of that stylistic element, including a lot of close-ups of cutting body parts and allusions to sex and bright color palettes. So anyway, for anyone interested in the Giallo genre, ask me questions. Till next time, Darklings.